Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I was really contemplating what I wanted to do, but I'm going to go ahead and do a story time for the first time just because I'm so livid and I'm still in the moment and I really just want to basically rant. So the reason why this even came to me is because this person has been in my inbox today, and it's to the point that I'm just so beyond irritated and fed up that here we go. So my ex, we'll call him, what's a really douchey name? Josh. So Josh has been in my inbox today, on and off, and him and his new little girlfriend decided that they're going to go ahead and creep on me through social media and stuff, and so I shut that down real quick, but he just likes to keep running his mouth, so that's where this rant's basically coming from. But I'm going to go ahead and give you the backstory of him and why he's such a doucher. Of course, this is my side, but I mean, there's so much shit that happened that if he wanted to have his side, go ahead. There's nothing that I'm going to leave out. I'm even going to put in all the bad things about myself. That's fine. So I used to bartend at this bar in my hometown, and Josh was in this little metal band, and I don't know what possessed me, but I got a little drunk and decided I was going to hit on him because I thought he was cute, which I'm an idiot. What was wrong with me? But anyways, so I went and I was flirting with him, and we went back and had an after party at his place with a bunch of people and drank, and we started hanging out, and next thing you know, we're dating. Well, Josh still lived with his mom, and he lived in his mom's basement. And I guess him and his ex-girlfriend had just broken up, and she just moved out, and I didn't even know, the time frame of how close it was. So it's kind of insane that he was literally just so lonely that he just jumped to another girl. Whatever. So me and Josh hang out, and I'm still bartending, and basically where things immediately went wrong is Josh didn't have his own vehicle, so he shared a car with his mom, and he wasn't allowed to really do a whole lot of stuff. At the time, he was 19 and I was 23. I honestly didn't know how young he was, otherwise I probably wouldn't have talked to him, but I thought he was cute and I started liking him, so I'm okay, who cares? But so I mean, that's my own idiotic fault for starting a relationship with someone that immature and still living with their parents, which if you still live with your parents, that's cool, but when you barely work, you don't have your own vehicle, you don't even have enough money to move out because your mom stole all your money out of your account, my fault for thinking it was a good idea. So anyways, I was still bartending, and I went to hang out with Josh after I was done bartending, and we hooked up for the first time, and I was a little loud, and that's basically where shit went south with his mom. His mom had a talk with me, oh, you're not allowed to go to Josh's shows, you're not allowed to hang out past this time, you're not allowed to do this and that and that. And I'm just okay, whatever. And so then her rules became more and more absurd, periodically. Oh, if Josh sees you during the day, he can't see you at night, or if he sees you at night, he can't see you during the day, or you're not allowed to overhear past 2 a.m., you're not allowed to hear past midnight, you're not allowed to hear past 10, you're not allowed to hear unless I'm here, all these absurd things. And then the funny thing is, things switched really quick, to the point that she's oh, well, actually, you can move in, I have the spare room for your stuff, you can help me pay bills, blah, blah, so on and so forth. So in my opinion, Josh wasn't paying any bills basically, because he contributed nothing, because he had this super small part-time job that he barely worked and barely made any money, and so she was paying all the bills by herself. So I'm okay, but if I'm living there, I'm going to contribute. And so I had just got a new job, I was starting to make a little bit more money. I'm okay, fine, I'll move in, and makes my bills less anyways, because it cuts everything into a third at their place, instead of me paying for everything at my apartment by myself. So I'm you know what? Sure, why not? I love Josh. Let's move in with him. That seems like a great idea. So of course, nothing went good. Me and his mom fought. Me and him fought. Finally, it got to the point that he had put his hands on me, and that should have been my red flag. But I just moved out of my place, and so I was in the thought of, oh my god, I have nowhere to go. I have to work things out with Josh, because this is where I'm supposed to live. I love him. I need to figure things out. Well, I should have gotten out of there immediately. And I thought that because I loved him, I could work things out and it would never happen again, which is completely false. In any abusive situation, get out immediately, because if it happens once, it's going to happen again. So, time goes on. Things were good periodically to the point that I'm like, okay, this is going to work. We're really good. We're really happy. But he would have his friends over all the time and they'd be there late. And I worked, actually worked, and I worked early, and I needed to sleep. And then I became the bad guy. Well, his mom let the cable and internet go so past due that it was disconnected. I'm like, well, I'm not going to not have Wi-Fi. So I got a different company in my name for the house. Well, the deal was we would split everything 3 ways. Well, she wasn't paying for internet, and she thought that because she lived there, that she got to use the password. And if we didn't give her the password, she was going to take the router, in which I pay for. Okay. So again, so much fighting. There was so much tension in the house. Well, Josh, when I first met him, I knew he liked to drink and party. Okay, fine. You're 19, you're in a band, you don't work a whole lot, which he started working more. He cycled through jobs to the point that he was contributing to the third of the stuff at the house that he needed to pay for. I mean, even if he was a little late here and there, he would make sure to pay me back. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll hold you to your word, so on and so forth. And so everything was not great. It really, really wasn't. I complained to my friends and family, and they're like, you need to get out of there, you need to break up. I'm like, oh, I love him, I have nowhere else to go. I didn't want to move back in with my mom because she was a smoker, and I got to the point that once I moved out of her house for college, and when I moved back to my hometown and had my own apartment, I can't deal with the smell of smoke. It literally gives me anxiety. I get panic attacks. I clean everything down with Febreze and disinfectant wipes. I wash everything. I can't handle it on a daily basis. So since all my stuff was finally smoke-free, lo and behold, Josh's mom was a smoker. Thankfully, I changed the lock. I had a key lock on this bedroom in which had all of my belongings ever. I had sold my couch. I sold some side tables. I sold a bunch of miscellaneous shit just so I could move into this one bedroom and live downstairs with Josh. And finally got to the point that Josh didn't just party. He started getting drunk consistently. And he got very angry all the time. Every little thing would set him off. There were points in which he headbutted me and gave me a bloody nose. There were points in which he headbutted me and gave me 2 black eyes. There was one time I had the security camera up in the basement because I was pretty sure his mom was messing with my stuff that I did have down there unlocked. And so I had that camera up, and he hated when I had it up because I don't know what he was doing. And I mean, I don't really care at this point, but he was so paranoid of this camera that he would unplug it when he was there, which is fine. I don't care, but just plug it in while you're not there so I can make sure that your mom's not doing some sneaky shit. And he had taken that camera down and he had broken it. And there was this little metal disc that was loose. And the whole fight stemmed because I didn't want to make the bed. The sheet came off the bed and I didn't want to make it. That's where that fight stemmed from. But he was drunk, so he threw this metal piece at the back of my head and cut the back of my head open, which I still have a scar. And I was bleeding on the back of my head. That was a big deal. So I called the cops on him and he went to jail. And shit was just so crazy. There would be little instances of that all the time. And so it was just continuously he'd push me. He had actually hit me in the head at one point, and my head bounced off the floor and I passed out for a second. And then he must have freaked out because I blacked out and my eyes went in the back of my head. And then I finally came back to. There was just so much shit. And don't get me wrong, I was also in the wrong because sometimes I would start the fights, sometimes I would run my mouth, and I probably just should have shut it. So, I mean, I'm not saying that him abusing me was okay or that it was my fault and I deserved it, but I'm just saying, there could have been times in which it could have been avoided if I would have shut my mouth. But there were times that also, if he was going to come at me and he was going to hit me, I would kick, I would hit back, I would do whatever I could. I was doing self-defense. And so, I my biggest thing that I could do was try to dig my nails into him, just to the point that he would get off of me and leave me alone. There were so many times that I couldn't do it anymore, and I wanted to leave. And so finally, not my friend anymore, but friend at the time, which she's a whole nother video on herself, her and her boyfriend moved in together, and so he had his place for rent. And I'm like, perfect. I need to get out of Josh's mom's house. I need to get away from her. She's crazy. I feel like she's causing most of the problems. I need to get out. I can afford things by myself. Like, bye. So I moved out, and of course she was livid and just started so much crap and ran her mouth, which, cool. You're like a 50-some-year-old woman. Congrats for you. And me and Josh actually fought the night before, right before I went and got the moving truck. And I said, if you don't want to come, don't come. Like, I don't care. And so he packed his stuff up and came. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe this will be good for us. We're away from her. We're in our own place. Maybe this can work. I don't know. We'll see. It didn't. Like, still the abuse happened. Still the fighting happened. He would try to leave, and he had me in the mindset of, like, if I wasn't with him, that no one would want to be with me. That I wasn't good enough for anybody. That I was trash. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't let him leave. Like, if he leaves, I'm forever going to be by myself, and I don't want to be alone. And it gave me so much anxiety. It would give me so much anxiety being alone that, like, I couldn't be alone. So I was trying to do whatever I could to make things work. I would make it so he couldn't leave. Like, I would stand in front of the door. But then there were times that he would be so abusive that he wouldn't even let me open the door to scream for help. He had snatched up my phones. I have an Apple Watch that he snatched up so I couldn't call 911. He, like, wouldn't let me call my mom. Like, I had to hide. And so the only thing that could make him, like, start to stop or slow down is when I would threaten with calling the cops. And as sad and pathetic as that is, I use it as much as possible because that was the only thing I could do to get him to stop or to leave me alone. And so I started getting smarter where I put, like, a lock on my watch so if he took it off, like, he couldn't do anything. I wasn't allowed to see my friends because if I was seeing my friends, I was cheating. I wasn't allowed to run errands because I was cheating. Like, we shared our locations with each other. Like, he knew where I was at all the times. He may or may not have been up to some shady shit. I don't care. Like, that's his own decision if he wanted to cheat on me. I, in my heart, believe that he did. And I'd seen messages between him and other girls where I would, if a guy messaged me, I let him know. I, wouldn't respond. I would, or tell him, like, hey, I have a boyfriend, leave me alone. Finally gotten to a point that I was so mentally drained. I wasn't emotionally involved in the relationship anymore. I was so unhappy that I had to do whatever I could to get things in a more positive note for myself. Because I had been through literally hell and back. I work in a company where if another store needed your help, you can go and like work in that store. So I'd worked in other stores. I knew other associates in this business, and there was a particular store that I worked in not long after I started the company that this guy, we'll call him Randy. Randy had flirted with me, and I shut it right down, didn't think anything of it. Well, Randy was coming to help out my store because then we were short-staffed. And so Randy had messaged me on our work Skype system and had messaged me, and then next thing you know, we started talking. Well, my heart and in my mind, I was done with Josh. Like, I emotionally didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't love him. I didn't feel it. Like, I was done. We were to the point that we were living together, but we weren't together. Yeah, social media might have said so, but nothing to me. Like, if he went and just walked out, I didn't care. We didn't really talk. We weren't intimate. We shared a bed, but only because we only had the one bed. And so he, Josh had his band practices. We worked. We basically didn't keep in contact that much anymore because we both were at the same point that we were done. But that was my place because it was my friends at the time who let me rent this out. Josh's name got thrown on there. So basically, if we got into a fight and I kicked him out, he'd be like, oh, well, I live here too. My name's on the lease. And so, like, I regretted that so much. And I wish I hadn't let him done that, because he hadn't thrown that in my face at some points. The biggest thing that we fought about the most was money, because finally got to a point where he would be in and out of jobs, and he either wouldn't have a job or he wouldn't be able to pay bills. And so at this new place, he started not paying any bills. Like, he didn't pay for rent, he didn't pay for water, he didn't pay for internet or cable, he didn't pay for anything. He had his car, because he, of course, had to splurge on a car, and got a new phone, and had to pay for car insurance and stuff. And so, like, he was so preoccupied with, like, those were his priorities. And a handle of vodka. The cheapest, grossest vodka, because God forbid he will ever be single, or ever be sober. So, me and Randy started talking, and before he came to my store, we were going to hang out and talk and stuff. And finally, me and Randy were texting, because basically I would come home and I'd lay in bed, and then Josh would be out in the living room playing video games. An Xbox, in which I bought, majority of those games that I bought, he'd bought a couple of them. And, like, he'd bought me a ring and a necklace over holidays that, you know, in my mind were mine. I'd bought him a watch that was nice and had, like, little diamonds in it for Valentine's Day and a birthday gift one year. And because he wasn't paying all those bills, like, in my mind, that watch was mine. That Xbox was mine. The jewelry was still mine. And for Christmas, which this is all around Christmas time, he was going to buy me this camera, because I'd majored in photography and I really wanted to kind of get back into it, because I didn't have a nice camera anymore, because I'd sold it. That's another story. But, like, in my mind, all that stuff was mine, because he owed me so much money. It had gotten to the point that last time I tallied it up, he owed me $5,000. And I told him when we broke up, I'm like, we originally had signed a contract that, like, you're going to pay me this much money a month, and this is when it's going to be paid off by. Like, we came to an agreement. Well, finally, I got to the point that, like, I'm like, forget the agreement. I'm keeping the Xbox. I'm keeping the games. I'm keeping the jewelry. And since you never bought me that camera, you're buying me that camera, and then we can be done. I'm like, that's it. So me and Randy were texting, and Randy's like, you know, you're so unhappy. You're so miserable. You should just break up with him. Like, because he knew that Josh was still living there. He knew that technically I was in a relationship still. Like, I didn't hide anything. And so, like, if anything, I was emotionally cheating on Josh. But again, in my heart and in my mind, I was so done, and I didn't love him anymore, that I was ready to let go. I was ready to get rid of the violence and the negativity and the awkwardness of being in my own house. And so one night, I was laying in bed texting Randy. Josh was out playing video games. I walk out there and I'm like, look, I think we should break up. I think we should be done. So Josh is like, really? I'm like, yeah. I said, you know, here's the deal. Here's what we'll do. I'm like, and that's it. So we ended things on mutual terms. He packed up a bunch of his stuff and he left. He was going to come back and get the rest of his stuff later. He had came to my door, like, bawling at one point, begging for me back. He wanted to kiss me to see if I still had feelings for him. Like, he was doing a bunch of stuff that just, he should have stopped. Well, he messaged Randy and said, yeah, me and Megan just hooked up the other night. And Randy's like, okay, and so me and Randy hung out a few times, like, nothing really happened. We made out, which to this day, Josh thinks that I hooked up with Randy, and I never did. Whatever. He can think what he wants. Like, I think I liked the attention and the emotional support and stuff that I was getting from Randy, because I wasn't getting it from Josh, but, like, I just wasn't into it. Like, nothing was going to come from this. Like, he lived just over an hour away. I didn't want to do the long distance stuff, like, whatever, at the time. Randy came to work in my store. We hung out. He stayed the night with me. I had Josh knocking on the door, asking if Randy was there. Like, he would not mind his own business. He would not leave me alone. Finally, he got to the point that he did leave me alone. He did move on. And the thing that sucks is he was at the bar that I wanted to go to, because, like, the night that Randy came into town, I was at this bar waiting on Randy, having a drink, and Josh shows up, sees me, and Randy storms out. I'm like, dude, leave me alone. Like, what are you doing? Like, I have my own life. We broke up. And so the next night, me and Randy were going to go back there, but I saw Josh there. I'm like, hard pass. Like, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to deal with the drama. Forget it. I don't care. And so I got to the point that me and Randy were just kind of, I was uncomfortable being around him. Like, I wasn't really okay. I'm like, hey, I wish you would leave. And he's like, no, you'll feel different in the morning. It'll be cool. And so, like, we didn't go to dinner. And I know that we were both hungry. Like, I went to bed at, like, 8 or 9. I'm like, okay, maybe if I'm, like, force him to go to bed, maybe he'll just, like, leave. So the next morning, I'm like, hey, you know, I really think you should leave. He's like, well, if I leave town, I'm not coming back. He's like, I'm going to go to the bar and have a drink. It's like 10 a.m. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm like, he packed up his shit. He left. Like, hopefully he'll get the hint. And so I don't know why, and I regret it to this day, but I called Josh, and I asked Josh to come back over, and I start crying, and I tell him, oh, I still have feelings for you. I want to make this work, blah, blah, so on and so forth. You know, I tell Randy to leave town like I was good and done, and he, of course, messaged Josh. He's like, oh, yeah, everything you think happened, blah, blah, so on and so forth. Like, dude, no. You're literally just mad because I'm not into you, and you're trying to start drama. Cool. Great. Congrats. Good for you. And so, of course, Josh believed it. Me and Josh, he came over. We fought. I tried getting him to stay. Like, I would stand in front of the door. Finally, whatever. You know, as the months trickle on, things go back to the way they were. They were to the point that, like, he either wouldn't come home, or I didn't know where he was at, or we would fight, and it would be physical, it would be emotional, it would be verbal. At one point, I'd gotten really drunk, and I'd broke his laptop, and I still don't remember this. Like, I blocked out. But apparently, I had slammed his laptop on the ground and broken, like, the screen, and, like, I called the cops on him because I wanted him to leave. He was, like, trespassing. A different night, he had broken a window because I locked him out because he got mad that I threw the Taco Bell because, like, we got into a fight, and I'm like, here's your food that I just paid for. Good for you. I just threw it all over the front yard. And so, like, he broke a window. I don't know if he did it on purpose. He said no. He said he was just knocking, but like, to break a window, you have to knock extremely hard. And so, like, there was just so much stuff still. Like, it was so bad and so negative. Well, luckily, because when stores need help, it becomes a list of new job opportunities. And so when a different store, not Randy's store, had a position open, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and move. My sister lives in this town. I need a fresh new start. I need to get away from Josh. And so I mentioned the idea to him, and he was not going to come with me. And I'm like, I'm moving. I'm leaving. So you need to get your shit in order, because when I move out, you have to move out, because you're obviously not paying bills to live here. You owe me money. So we finally came to the agreement of, forget the $5,000. I'll keep the Xbox. I'll keep the games. I'll keep the watch. I'll keep the jewelry. I'll keep the camera. Call it good and done. Technically, my car is also in his name because my credit's not so great because I made poor life decisions in college. And so, like, my car is also in his name, but I'm like, well, I'll keep making my payments. Don't worry. You know, this is my means of communication. I'm not going to do that. It's also in my, like, helping my credit by me paying it. I'm like, so, like, no worries there, whatever. The point that he, like, started moving his shit in. And I'm like, no. And again, the fights would happen. A little bit of violence. There really wasn't a whole lot this time. Like, it just was to the point that, like, it was so much negativity and so much, like, emotional drain. And he would go back to our hometown for a few days and go and sleep around or hang out with girls or doing whatever he was doing and call me so many disrespectful names and hang up on me, and he'd block me on stuff. And I finally, thank God, finally got to a point that I'm like, I need to relieve myself of this. Like, I'm never going to progress in life. I'm never going to be fully happy. I'm never going to be fully positive. Like, it was affecting my work. It was affecting my mental health. It was affecting my friendships and relationships with other people. And I finally let go. And I got rid of him. We had, like, one last conversation where, like, hey, this is it. Was it it? Of course not. He would show up in my texts every now and then, like, oh, I miss you, let's hook up, you're so hot, like, I miss you, and just, like, all sorts of stupid stuff. I'm like, no, like, stop. He's like, oh, I'm in town, let me come hang out. No, stop. And so, like, it would just sprinkle here and there. Like, he texted me Happy Valentine's Day. Like, no. And this Valentine's Day, I had a boyfriend. So I'm like, Johnny from I Do My Boyfriend's Makeup. Like, me and Johnny got together around December. And so Josh would still, like, periodically message me. And I'm just like, can you stop? Like, I'm not hooking up with you. I don't want to see you. We're not going to hang out. Like, I don't miss you. I don't love you. I don't have love for you. I'm not in love with you. None of it. Like, we're good and done. I've moved on. I moved on to something that's so much better. So much more positivity. Johnny would do absolutely anything and everything for me. He loves me to death. I'm actually upping my life and moving with Johnny because I see a future with him. And I know that there's potential there. And I'm not willing to just give it up and just let go of everything. I would never do that with Josh. Like, yeah, we moved houses across town. That's it. And so we're finally at the point in which, like, I got that Valentine's Day one. I can't remember whether or not I got one on my birthday. I know I got one from a different ex, and I let Johnny know about that one. I don't really remember. I started drinking really early on my birthday. That whole night was kind of a mess, to be honest. But anyways, finally, I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe Josh will leave me alone. Every now and then, like, some of my friends would be like, oh yeah, I saw him at so-and-so place, and he tried talking to me or saying hi or whatever. And I know my best friend would rip him a new one if she ever got the chance, which, thank you, girl. Love you for that. But anyways, so I'm minding my business, having a nice day by myself, having a day off, running errands, relaxing, doing everything I need to do. And of course, Josh wants to slide up in my messages again. Okay, I see you. So, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is something quick and simple, which it started off as something quick and simple. And he's like, oh, hey, can I get those Xbox games back from you? And I'm like, no, either the ones that I didn't want, I sold, or the ones that I do want, I'm keeping. Like, I'm not giving you anything. And, like, the whole deal was because you owed me so much money. Well, then, of course, like, his little girlfriend now, or not girlfriend, or whatever they are, I don't really care, tried to add me on social media, and I'm just like, there's no way. Like, get out. So I messaged him, I'm like, look, tell your little girlfriends to stay out of my social media, like, no. He's like, oh, she didn't try adding you, blah, 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 but your new hair looks like trash, and you look ew, and just saying all this absurd trash, and I was so livid. And then he wants to go ahead and, like, run his mouth continuously. So I have him and her, already had him blocked on everything. Had her blocked. I had Johnny block them because they were trying to creep, like, through Johnny. I'm like, I'm not having this. Like, get out. And he's like, oh, well, that's my car. I'm like, no, it's not. I pay for it. He's like, oh, that's my camera. I'm like, no, it's not. You owed me $5,000, or did you forget? And he's like, oh, sorry that you supported me. You want a cookie for it? Like, yeah, I shouldn't have supported you. I should have let you leave. I should have kicked you out. Like, I'm an idiot. I get it. It's my fault. But leave me alone. End rant. Again, I'm so blessed now to have the job that I have, to have the opportunities that I have. I finally am able to have my friends back. I'm finally able to be myself because Josh didn't even let me wear, like, certain stuff because he would accuse me of cheating if I wanted to dress like I wanted to dress, where Johnny wouldn't bat an eyelash. Like, I'm able to hang out with my friends. I'm able to talk to my friends. I'm able to, finally breathe again. It was almost like this weight has been lifted. And, yeah, like, Johnny legit would do the world for me. He would never think about placing a hand on me. He would never call me a name. Like, yeah, we're a couple and we have normal fights, but it's never to the degree that me and Josh had. It's never to the point that, like, I'm so affected that I can't work. Like, there's just so much stuff. And I just, I hope the best for Josh, and I hope, you know, he quits drinking and not being an alcoholic, and I hope he doesn't hit this new girl, and hope he gets his life together. And, you know, I just wish that he would leave me alone. I wish that she wouldn't try to add me. I wish that there wasn't so much drama that people are trying to rope me into. Which, given, you know, sometimes I allow it to happen, or I don't stop it. So I get it. But I just hope that for everyone's well-being that it just stops. Just, like, leave me alone. So, appreciate you guys listening to me rant, whether you wanted to listen or not. Like always, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Click that bell for little notifications, because I do have a bunch of ideas that I'll be doing here soon. So hopefully some fun stuff. Hopefully, you know, a lot more positivity. So I got that done and out and shook off and everything. Insta, Twitter, all linked down below. That's it, guys. So thanks for listening. Till next time. See you later.